Thanks, Rennie. We'll just take this opportunity here to give you a rough overview of what this flash briefing will cover. We're going to begin by discussing housing and construction trends at a high level to set the table for the broader discussion. And then we'll take a brief look at startups and new construction techniques. And lastly, we'll wrap up by examining the kinds of developments and partnerships that big technology companies are making in housing. We want to clarify here that for the most part we've chosen to examine trends in construction for the time being, but that there is also plenty of ground to be covered at a later date with regard to smart home products and on-demand and mobility solutions, as well as more traditional transactional real estate platforms. So the big idea here is that driven by a convergence of technology development and market need, entrepreneurs and technology companies alike have drawn aim at the residential construction industry. We're seeing insurgent startups that are testing a variety of construction techniques, and we're also seeing big technology companies participating through direct development projects. So we'll start with housing and construction trends, just as sort of a high-level background to the space. We really are trying to investigate what's driving this trend, and for the most part it seems to be a large national housing shortage in the United States. Cities have grown in population as residents who might have previously moved to the suburbs are staying longer or not moving at all. And in many cities, economic growth from industries like technology have drawn hundreds of thousands of new high-income residents. But housing supply in these major cities have not developed in lockstep to growth and need. And instead, new housing stock has decreased substantially. And growth in urban center populations has driven rent and housing values upwards. By some estimates, the U.S. has a 7.3 million unit shortage of homes, and in 2017, the price of homes rose 6.2%, which was 2 times that of income and 3 times that of inflation. So as a consequence of this, about 1 in 4 Americans is severely rent burdened, paying more than 50% of their monthly income on housing. Much of the lack of supply in housing is driven by a lack of labor, as well as limited land supply and strict zoning regulations that really inhibits the construction of new homes. Seattle, for instance, is a really good example of a convergence of a lot of these trends. It has a major technology player, Amazon, which has grown its real estate footprint as it's grown as a company. As a tenant of commercial real estate space, the company accounts for nearly 20% of all of Seattle's office supply. And the company accounts for more total square footage space, roughly 8 million square feet, than the top 40 largest employers in Seattle combined. So this growth as a company has drawn in new employees. It's also raised property values around the city. And while it's certainly easy to point to large companies like Amazon as key drivers for population growth and income increases, much of Seattle's housing crisis is really due to zoning regulations and the high cost of construction, which are stifling housing supply. In Seattle, for instance, single-family zoning accounts for about 49% of all developable land mass, with only 8% devoted to multifamily homes and 8% devoted to commercial real estate. The majority of new housing is actually focused in these multifamily pockets, but has not kept up with demand. Glenn Kelman, the CEO of Redfin, described his company's home market of Seattle and the broader U.S. market as being severely understocked with homes, saying, quote, "No matter what we do to deliver more value to customers, the fundamental problem is that there aren't enough homes to buy." One big reason for the lack of new housing is the cost of construction. The construction industry invests on an annual basis only about 0.5 percentage point of its annual construction value in research and development. And this compares to 3.7% for the automotive industry and 8.8% for computing electronics. Eric Basuk of Sidewalk Labs, a Google subsidiary, an Alphabet subsidiary, has said that the net result is that buildings are made the same way they were during the mid-20th century. Workers perform highly repetitive tasks and custom fit stock materials together on site. Trevor Schick, who's a president of materials at Katerra, a construction tech startup, has commented that, quote, people are building homes today essentially the same way they did in the mid-1800s. Economies of scale just don't exist. Most projects are designed, planned, quoted, bought out, and built as one-off projects. And this really makes the economics of housing innovation hard. Construction costs are by most estimates, driven by three main factors, which are material efficiency, labor productivity, and commodity pricing. And what we're starting to see is that startups are attacking these three areas. Michael Marks, the chairman of Katerra, the startup we just mentioned, has publicly criticized the construction industry, saying it's shocking how poorly things work. There's a lack of quality processes throughout the system. So we'll take a look at some of the startups that are innovating in this space. For starters, I think it's important to discuss briefly the kinds of technological developments in the sector, namely off-site construction. So broadly speaking, off-site construction involves designing and constructing pieces of a building off-site or not on the construction site. Prefabrication involves building component parts of a building that are fitted together on-site, while modular construction involves creating larger scale pieces or boxes that are stacked and connected on-site. There are several startups that are operating in this space, and some of them integrate the fabrication, design, and materials procurement as one, but thus far only some have had fledgling success. So Blockable is an example of a modular construction company. The Washington-based company has raised about $6 million to date from Borealis Ventures, Jason Calacanis, Kapoor Capital, and Vulcan Capital, among other investors. An interesting note with regard to Blockable's investors, Vulcan Capital specifically, is the private equity arm of Vulcan, founded by Paul Allen of Microsoft. And Vulcan has broad strategic exposure to real estate in Seattle, making very early and prescient bets on downtown commercial real estate, which is now largely occupied by Amazon. In fact, Blockable was founded by an ex-Amazon employee, Aaron Holm, who led physical retail efforts at the e-commerce company. In public interviews about why he started the company, Holm has vocally criticized the hassles of regulation on construction, saying, quote, on the one side, I was building all kinds of hardware and software with the engineering team, and then in the outside world, looking how to scale out that physical stores, I was looking at this world that was completely inefficient, Holm has said. According to the Seattle Times, Blockable's modular homes are designed to be plug and play, coming fully designed with all of their appliances, wiring, and plumbing, and they can serve as standalone homes or be connected and stacked to create buildings that are up to 5 stories high. Each unit costs between $58,000 and $85,000. And in Seattle, the company has recently partnered with the Compass Housing Alliance to create up to 85 housing units with a heavy emphasis on affordability. So Katerra, previously mentioned, is an example of a startup that has gained serious momentum in the prefab construction space. So while prefab startups typically benefit from efficiencies and repeatable construction, Katerra's strengths in supply chain and inventory management give it an added edge in that area. The Menlo Park-based company has raised $1.16 billion in capital, most recently raising a $856 million Series D from investors like the SoftBank Group, Foxconn Technology Company, Soros Fund Management, and Khosla Ventures, among other investors. To date, Katerra has done about $1.3 billion worth of bookings, and as of April of 2018, it employed over 1,400 people. The company is led by Michael Marks, former CEO of Flextronics, Jim Davidson, co-founder and managing director of Silver Lake, and Fritz Wolf, executive chairman of the Wolf Company. John Hui, who's the chief strategy officer of Foxconn, sits on the company's board and likely adds deep expertise to Katerra's factory development. Katerra really wants to bring to bear a highly integrated construction process to multifamily and workforce housing construction. The company's approach is to own all facets of the construction process, from design, manufacturing, logistics, to on-site implementation. And it is developing factory-like manufacturing processes where repeatable kit of parts designs can be easily configured, constructed in pieces in off-site factories, and then integrated on-site. The company uses building information modeling to produce design scripts for its projects that plug directly into its global supply chain and integrate the design and material sourcing. Per the company, it leverages SAP HANA, the Katerra Market Analytics platform, a logistics mobile app for on-site, and several IoT technologies to organize its construction sites and its inventory. Craig Curtis, who is president of Katerra Architecture, has said that, quote, plans go directly from design to the factory floor and to the construction site. Materials and products arrive at our construction sites on time and ready to install, and as a result, the activity at a Katerra construction site more closely resembles a process of precision sequence product assembly than traditional construction. I think the company really hopes its repeatable designs allow it to standardize the procurement of supplies, and contingent on enough project volume, it could potentially find efficiencies ordering in bulk. When it's all said and done, the company estimates it's able to achieve about 40% reduction in project schedule for a standard 3-story suburban workforce housing unit. As of March of 2018, Katerra had about 12 multifamily projects in construction with 200 to 400 units per site, and plans to expand the property types it constructs in the future. So Katerra is definitely expanding both via acquisition and new factories. At present, Katerra produces its building materials in a factory in Phoenix, but Todd Bayreuther, who is the Senior Director of Advanced Building Materials at the company, has recently said that the site selection for its new factories will likely be strategically located next to timber resources. So it plans to open 6 manufacturing plants in 2019, including a plant specifically devoted to timber production in Spokane, Washington. In addition to new factory openings, Katerra recently acquired Fields Construction Company of New Jersey. Under the acquisition, Fields will rebrand and adopt Katerra's technology practices. Much of Katerra's focus on timber is likely due to the widely held opinion that the material will gain popularity in large-scale construction. The push for tall timber has 2 major reasons. It's cost-effective, and it's quite sustainable compared to steel and concrete. Both steel and concrete require a significant amount of energy to produce, and additionally, timber construction reduces the total weight of buildings by some estimates as much as 30% compared to steel and 60% compared to concrete. So this allows for smaller building foundations. The T3 building shown here in Minneapolis is one of the largest timber buildings constructed in North America at 220,000 square feet, and one of its tenants includes Amazon. So we've found that Canada really seems to be pushing forward tall timber construction, and we think that likely makes sense given the abundance of lumber in Canada. In October of 2017, Canada's Minister of Natural Resources, Jim Carr, announced a mass timber program called the Green Construction Through Wood, which encouraged timber construction in tall buildings. And this was the second timber program, the first being the Tall Wood Building Demonstration Initiative, a project which resulted in the 18-story Brock Commons Tallwood House at the University of British Columbia, which is the tallest majority wood structure in the world. But in addition to off-site prefab and modular homes, we're also seeing some startups retrofitting existing buildings for greater residential efficiency by transforming them into co-living spaces. So WeWork has surely been an early mover in this space with co-living locations in New York City and Washington, D.C. But despite plans for more rapid expansion, there are still only 2 WeLive locations since its launch in 2016. According to public reporting, WeWork has put the program on pause until it could be, quote, 10 times better. And amidst rumors of a new location in Seattle, WeWork's executive in charge of WeLive, James Woods, has said that the company wants to take, quote, take the time to refine this product and get it right. Despite these public stumbles, especially from a company as well capitalized as WeWork, other startups have not been dissuaded from producing co-living products. Star City is an example of a company that is growing in the co-living space. The San Francisco-based startup is a graduate of Y Combinator and has raised $18 million to date, most recently via a $16 million Series A from Allray Capital, Bullpen Capital, Invest AG, and Y Combinator. Star City's business model has focused on buying former hotels or parking garages or office retail and other commercial real estate via lease or outright purchase, and then renovates them for communal living with competitively priced rents at about $1,800 per person on their website, and including free Wi-Fi, utilities, and cleaning services. Residents rent a single bedroom for that $1,800 and then have access to communal space. So this business strategy is similar to WeLive in that it's capital intensive, and construction and renovation build-out costs really add up. Star City thus far has 3 buildings open with 36 units and 9 buildings in development with 8,000 people reportedly on its waiting list. And as of the time of its Series A fundraise, Star City told the Times that it plans for hundreds of units in the San Francisco area in 2018 and thousands by 2019. So Common, which is based in New York City, is another example of a company in the co-living space. Common lets customers rent private bedrooms with access to fully furnished communal spaces with cleaning, laundry, and Wi-Fi. And both, Common partners with landlords and charges a management fee, unlike Star City, which owns its buildings outright. So Common was founded by Brad Hargrave, a co-founder of the company General Assembly, and has raised $65 million to date, most recently via a $40 million Series C from Maveron and Norwest Venture Partners. According to reporting by The Information, Common earned $6 million in management fees in 2017, and the company takes 30% of a building's net operating income and 3% of its gross rental income. Common definitely has ambitious growth goals. As of December of 2017, it had 500 residents, but based off of future growth projections, it projects out revenue to increase to $130 million by 2020 by taking on new properties and adding upwards of 25,000 residents. Common CEO Brad Hargraves has claimed that his company's goal isn't to introduce a new way of living, but really serve a market need, saying, quote, "I'm not looking to change the way that people live, I'm just looking to solve a housing need." If any clients are interested in digging deeper into the companies or research we have discussed here, this slide can be accessed in the distributed presentation, and we'll include links to the platforms, to the companies discussed, and to other research reports around construction tech. So lastly, we're going to take a look at the participation of big technology companies in the housing space. In addition to the startups we've already discussed, some of the largest technology companies are driving innovation via partnerships, paid projects, and real estate developments. One such example is Amazon's partnership with Lennar. So while not the most significant foray into construction, Amazon has recently formed a partnership with Lennar, Shea, and Brookfield Homes, some of America's largest residential home builders and developers. The terms of the Lennar partnership specifically call for Amazon Experience Centers located in states like California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Virginia, and Washington, where customers can tour the Lennar homes and interact with Amazon's suite of smart home devices. Under the terms of the partnership, Amazon smart devices will be physically implanted into every new residence Lennar builds. So the deal with Lennar is significant for a few reasons. Amazon is notably forming a partnership in this space with a high-volume construction builder. Lennar reportedly constructed nearly 30,000 homes in 2017. Additionally, from a competitive perspective, Apple and its HomeKit suite had a partnership with the builder as well. However, unlike Apple, Amazon offered up its Amazon Home Services division to assist home buyers in setting up their new smart homes. The benefits of this partnership to Amazon are fairly obvious, as they nearly guarantee the homeowner will become a customer of Amazon's e-commerce services. That is, unless they physically remove the devices from their walls. But according to the reporting by The Information, for construction companies like Lennar, the partnership will differentiate the homes from existing inventory on the market. Amazon is also developing a presence in multifamily homes as well. So separately, Amazon has, in October 2017, formed a partnership with landlords including Avalon Bay, Equity Residential, Greystar, and the Bozzuto Group to place package delivery lockers in the buildings, in those landlords' buildings, representing over 850,000 units in the United States. Greystar, for instance, which manages 415,000 units, will install the Amazon Locker Hub system in 125 of its communities and offer the service to all of its buildings. So Facebook, another large technology company, has plans to expand its Menlo Park campus and add residential housing. The company will construct 1,500 units of housing, of which 225 will be at below market rates. Additionally, the plans call for mixed-use retail, including a grocery store and pharmacy, in addition to 8 acres of plazas, parks, and biking and pedestrian paths. Google has also been active in housing. Alphabet, Google's parent company, reportedly tripled its capital spending to $7.3 billion in the first quarter of 2018. And according to its CFO, Ruth Porat, the spending was driven by data centers, undersea cables, but also real estate. So Google's latest foray into residential construction has been its development plans for Moffett Field in Mountain View. The company ordered 300 modular housing units, spending between $25 and $30 million on the order, which is to be fulfilled by Factory OS, a modular housing startup. Factory OS claims it can reduce the costs of building by 20%, while also building 40% faster. Google has also reportedly recently issued a request for proposal concerning more on-campus apartments, and Katera was one of the companies that replied. In December of 2017, Google received approval from Mountain View officials to build a 9,850 apartment unit development. The project is related to the company's plans to expand its campus in North Bayshore and Mountain View. In addition to the nearly 10,000 housing units, the company will build 3.6 million square feet of new office space. Google is using SciWest, Sobrato, and Broadreach, as well as Arugala companies to construct the apartments. Besides Google, one of Alphabet's other subsidiaries, Sidewalk Labs, is specifically focused on urban innovation. Sidewalk Labs has bold development plans for a plot of area on the Toronto waterfront. In its extensive response to Toronto's RFP, Sidewalk Labs laid out an expansive vision for the development of Toronto's waterfront. It has plans for residential, retail, energy, waste removal, mobility, and more. But for the purposes of our research, we restricted our focus to its plans for residential development and construction, as well as the digital layer that will integrate the site. After winning Toronto's preliminary approval, the company has committed $50 million and 1 year's time worth of engagement to develop Quayside, which is a portion of the total waterfront site in question. Quayside is 12 acres, and under current plans, its first residents would move in 2022. The current plans for the waterfront in total call for between 5.5 and 6.5 square feet of construction, with 65% of that space devoted to residential housing. The foundation of Sidewalk's plan calls for a neighborhood that is integrated with a digital platform to measure and improve urban planning. The digital layer will be achieved via a net of sensors and cameras that will provide, quote, an unprecedented degree of insight into the physical environment. The digital platform will have four main components: Sense, which will be a way to measure, understand, and improve the environment via a mesh of air quality sensors, noise level sensors, radar, laser, and range finding sensors, as well as computer vision cameras and hyperlocal weather sensors. Model, which will be able to run simulations for hypothetical events affecting the neighborhood. Map, which will gather location-based data on infrastructure, buildings, and shared resources. And lastly, Count, which will be a resident portal to engage with the public services for the neighborhood. Many of the company's plans are a blend of the technology trends we've discussed here. Modular construction, prefab, manufacturing, and standardization, as well as tall timber construction are all planned for. Sidewalk's RFP purports that it will take a, quote, comprehensive approach to construction, creating a standardized parts library and advanced manufacturing techniques, including, quote, repeatable assemblies, robotic construction, on and off-site automation, and 3D printing in order to drive down cost of design, labor, and materials. It estimates that the use of modular construction alone might save 12.5% on commercial fit-out costs. Sidewalk Lab's core building product is the Loft. The product's thesis centers on the assumption that ongoing and frequent interior changes will be demanded of each building, and therefore an interior unit that can be reconfigured within a strong skeletal structure is optimal, reducing the cost of future construction. This assumption is termed radical mixed use, where residential, retail, office, and parking might exist within the same buildings. So in order to achieve this kind of mixed building usage, Sidewalk Labs plans to create a standardized unit of 5 feet. So this might allow for frequent interchangeability of interior building components and really future-proof future-proof buildings. The company is engaged with Bureau Happold Engineering to develop the Loft concept. From a regulatory perspective, Sidewalk Labs suggested to Toronto that it consider a, quote, outcome-based code to allow for such diversity of building usage. In such a system, the usage of the properties and its consequential environmental outputs govern and regulate the properties. For example, site safety, noise, energy usage, and pollution might be measured factors. So the regulation will reward and penalize based on this measured output of those factors, with 80% of the buildings falling into one flexible use category. Additionally, the company plans to promote co-living via its digital platform, enabling a, quote, radical sharing of durable goods and splitting costs of building and personal services that lead to increased space efficiencies. In addition to co-living, Sidewalk Labs plans for micro units between 250 and 350 square feet. So to wrap up, we want to look ahead and think about some valuable questions to ask of what's occurring in the sector. I think it's important to consider whether or not large technology companies and startups are going to continue to collaborate further, or whether or not existing construction companies will catch up with these technological processes in future partnerships. Another question to ask is whether big technology companies are going to seek to partner with existing construction players, as Amazon has done with Lennar. We're also paying attention to whether or not Sidewalk Labs' Toronto project leads to larger urban planning projects in major U.S. cities. And we also think it's worth paying attention to whether or not any startups in construction or co-living become potential acquisition targets. So next, we'll take some questions from audience members. We're seeing a couple questions around Amazon's partnership with Lennar and multifamily operators. So maybe it'll be worth adding some thoughts here. I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on, in our opinion. We've observed that kind of a partnership trend elsewhere in real estate. I think you can look at a number of partnerships that Blackstone has made with startups in Stuytown that really can be seen to be a way of differentiating the real estate from the rest of the market. Stuart Miller, who is the former CEO of Lennar and is now the executive chairman of the company, recently was on Spencer Rascoff's, the CEO of Zillow, Spencer Rascoff's podcast. And he said that the Amazon partnership is definitely a differentiator for Lennar in terms of its new housing supply. But he also thinks it's a way of introducing the idea of obsolescence into the home market for the first time. So Lennar has done a lot of work around equipping homes with Wi-Fi across the entire residence, and now through its partnership with Amazon, introducing smart home technology, I think adds to that effect. So if those devices can continue to take meaningful market share and achieve a tighter integration into new homes that Lennar builds, this might serve as a way to introduce obsolescence into the home market and give home sellers leverage in price negotiations if they have that integrated technology, or make home buyers more selective of the homes they choose. So I think that's where we'll leave it. Thank you guys for joining the webinar. And as we said at the outset, the slide and presentation will be distributed following the presentation. Thank you.